All right. Hello, everybody, for this week's lunch break. We've got some questions to cover, some topics to cover, and then just take whatever questions you all have as you join. So, as you are here, go ahead and drop your question in the chat, and or just say hi. Let me know that you're here, where you're watching from, if I don't already know. But yeah, so say hi in the chat. Let me know questions. And while we wait on other questions to come in, I will get started on the ones that I do know. So let me get some things in order here. So say hi in the chat. Let me know you're here. And I'm going to tell you guys, because I can't get, hey, Jason. Can't seem to get this to show up correctly, so I'm going to drop this down a little bit. See if I can find a place to put this. Okay. That will have to work. All right. We're going to go with this for now. All right. So, Jason, good that you're here. I'll start off with, I think you had one of the questions that I wanted to cover here. And I believe that was about water discharge, right? So let me pull it back up here and see. Okay, I don't have it pulled up, but yeah, so we'll cover discharge ink. I think it was Jason that had asked, or maybe it was I think it was a combination of warp drive and printing discharge. I've had quite a bit of conversations here recently about discharge because I did a post about it, and just that little video clip of some discharge actually activating that was on a tri-blend, a Bella Camus tri-blend shirt. And so I thought I would cover a little bit of that. Jason, you'll mix the warp drive into the discharge just as you would water-based ink, and it will work just fine. So I would recommend adding it if you're considering whether you want to add it or not. It's if you're not running through a dryer, or a dryer that actually has forced air, is ideal for printing discharge or printing water-based. And so if you don't have that, then you'll just want to mix the warp drive in there as you would with just regular water-based. So for me, curing with my flash, whenever I print discharge, I just add the warp drive to that the same as I do when I'm printing just straight water-based. And really you can print a combination of discharge and water-based, where you've got some of the ink with discharge agent in it and some without, because if you're doing you could use discharge for the base, almost like an underbase, or like an underbase, and then print just regular water-based over top of that. That also, the top print does not have to be a discharge print. And so that would be times when, you need a bit of a white base. So maybe you would do a discharge white, and that would be something that's not necessarily all cotton because you're not getting a good base out of it, or maybe the natural cotton color is skewing your water-based color. So you could do a base underneath it. There are various situations. There's no right or wrong. As long as it comes out with the print you want, then it's the correct way. But yeah, you do add the warp drive low cure to the discharge. So let's cover a few things about discharge while, we'll wait on any other questions. If you have questions about discharge or about anything else, screen printing or business, drop those in the chat and I will get to those as soon as I can during this next hour. So I'm here to answer your questions. I don't really have an agenda. So let me know your questions that you're facing right now and how I can help you. So let's talk about discharge for a minute. You can do discharge plastisol or discharge water base. I personally, obviously, you guys know I print all water based, so I opt for the water based discharge. It comes in two types. You've got a discharge white and a discharge base. The discharge white is a base with a pigment already in it. So it's ready to go. You just need to add the discharge agent, the powder, the formaldehyde powder. So you have the discharge, either a base or a white, and then you have the powder. The powder gets mixed into however much ink you want to do for, I would take a solo cup, figure out how much you need for the job you're doing or however many shirts. And then you mix that in there, find out how much, and then you add anywhere from 4 to 6% of the discharge agent, the powder, to that, and it activates it. It's an activator at that point. That has a shelf life. So once you add the activator, it's only going to be good for, the next probably 6 to 8 hours, and then it's tossed. Okay. So that's why you only want to mix whatever you need and not everything. And that's why it comes separate. You do want to make sure that you mix that powder to where it fully dissolves. So you're going to mix for 5 or 10 minutes to make sure that fully dissolves inside of the ink. Otherwise, it's not going to really create the chemical reaction that it needs to fully discharge. So the clear discharge, it's just going to it's essentially a bleach. So it's going to take the garment back, cotton. It's taking the cotton fibers in a garment back to its original cotton natural color. That it tends to be somewhat of an off-white, which means it can be a really cool look just by itself. So basically you end up bleaching the shirt. And so it's a really neat look. What you guys have seen on my video on some of my social posts is me discharging a tri-blend shirt. You may have heard people say you can't discharge tri-blend or you can only discharge cotton. Sure, if you want a solid print that is, a consistent color throughout, then yeah, you want that to be cotton. But I thought it would be neat to have a heathered print, just like this shirt's a little bit heathered. And so that's what I did. And I discharged on tri-blends and I had no ink on top of it. It was essentially just bleaching. And what it does is it just bleaches the cotton fibers. And it's a really neat result. So I highly recommend you do that. Give it a try. It's super cool. And so it's a really neat end result. So you have the clear, and then of course the base, the white base. When you print that, know that it has a ton of pigment in it and it's kind of thick. So you will end up with a really thick feeling print that will soften as you wash it. So when you go to wash it, it basically, you have all of the different colors. I'm sorry, all the different pigments and the formaldehyde powder in there, and then it will soften up when you wash. And I have a phone call, so give me 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. My mom is flying out and had a question from the airport, so needed to answer that. Okay, so that print will soften up, so don't be worried when you print a discharge. If you do the white, it's going to feel really thick and gross, but it softens as soon as you wash it. Jason has a good point here with the fumes with the formaldehyde. It is sketchy. Whenever I print it, I open up, I never know which angle this is. I open up this window, and then I've got 2 more windows over here on the other side of the basement, and I open up one of those, and I usually have a fan blowing, like I've got my flash right here, and I usually have a fan that I put right over here, and it blows air across towards the window. And then I've got this, this filtration system here, this air filter, and I usually turn it on. And then aside from that, I make sure my basement door is closed so that it doesn't get into the rest of the house as much. And as long as I've done that, you can't smell it in the rest of the house. And I just be sure that I'm not down here for a long period of time, and I give myself a break, and make sure maybe sometimes I step outside the window a little bit and breathe in. It's not super overwhelming. It's just not super good for you. So it is present. It's not to where you can't breathe, as long as you just open up some windows and have some fans blowing, and that will help. So I've not ever been too concerned about it. Again, it's formaldehyde. It's not healthy for you to be breathing that in. So take whatever precautions or care you feel like you need to or are necessary for you and your health, and whatever you're concerned about. It's your concern is merited. So it is totally understandable to whatever extreme you want to go to make sure that it is filtered as much as possible. I think that's great. If you're not concerned about it, then just do it, and I don't think it's going to be a big deal. But I would just say have a fan blowing towards a window, and maybe even have another fan continuing to blow that out of the window, and you'll be fine. And it won't be overwhelming at all. So, or put on a filter mask. I do have like a woodworking thing that goes over, and it's got like filters built into it that are like interchangeable. So I have done that before if it's really strong, but for the most part, it's really not that bad. The last time I did a discharge print, it was a 8-color design. So it was the discharge base, the white, and then 8 water-based colors on top of it. And I just opened the windows and had the fan blowing, and it was totally fine. And I really, for the most part, could hardly notice it unless I was standing right in front of the fan. And so it's just going to depend on what the exhaust is like in your area, whether it's in your garage or whatever. Open up a garage door, and I think you'll be fine. But I have tended to do it during the day when nobody's here, or just my wife's home and the kids are gone, just for precaution's sake. Again, I went upstairs and you couldn't even notice it, and then I come back downstairs and you could notice it. So my basement door, I've got a thing across the bottom that blocks air from coming up from the basement, so that helps as well. So definitely try to have some exhaust there, if not at least some fans blowing in a window. So then moving deeper into the discharge stuff, if you're mixing, so I have Green Galaxy water-based inks. If you have the Green Galaxy mixing system and the pigments and things like that, and you want to mix up your own discharge PMS color, and you have if you go to the Fusion mixing system website and you plug in your Pantone color and you find the recipe there, that recipe is going to give you the first 2 ingredients of every recipe in the Green Galaxy system are going to be the clear core and the opaque core. Mixing colored water-based ink with the Fusion mixing system is super easy, because all you do is you take the clear core and the opaque core measurement and add those 2 together, and that becomes your discharge base. So you take that clear base, that discharge base, and if your recipe calls for 100 grams of clear core and 80 grams of opaque core, then you instead of those, you don't do those, you instead replace it with 180 grams of the discharge base. And then you add whatever other pigments that recipe calls for, and now you have your discharge ink. So then mix it all. So you mix however much you want, and then after that's well mixed, you take and have a solo cup and mix and pull out only what you need for the order you're going to do. Find that measurement, add 4 to 6% discharge powder. Now you're ready to print. Again, because if you add that 4 to 6% discharge powder to the entire mixture, that mixture now has a time limit on it. And so once that's done, that ink's done. And so you could waste it if you're not going to use all of it. If you're mixing up everything you're going to use right then and there, fine, add the agent to it. But just take that into consideration when you're going to add the discharge powder. Any other questions about discharge while we're on the topic. Trying to think if there's anything else to keep in mind with that. If you're printing the discharge as an underbase, like I've done in the past, you use the discharge white. I have done it to where I've just used the discharge white and gotten a nice, good white base and printed color on that. I've also done it to where I've used the discharge base, the clear one, and used that as an underbase and printed the color on top of the discharged color. So it basically prints color onto that cream off-white color. And that turns out great too. So it depends on, what you have on hand and how vibrant you want that to be. I have also, because I was curious one time, took the discharge white, added some extra pigment to it, some extra white pigment, printed that, and then printed just a standard water-based color over top of it, cured it, and then washed it, and the pigment kind of flaked away because I purposely didn't discharge it the full time, and it really gave this kind of flaky, vintagey look. It was super cool. I haven't tried to reproduce it, but I was just kind of messing with some different ideas, and I did one hoodie that way, and it turned out amazing. So I need to try to reproduce it because it was a super cool look. So we got a good question here. I love water-based ink. Let me make this a little smaller here. Love water-based ink, but I have a hard time telling if it's cured without washing it. I don't want to use the catalyst due to chemical sensitivities. Any tips? Thank you for your reply. That's a tough one. And I totally understand the chemical sensitivity and the desire not to use the catalyst for that reason. It's a great reason, and it's totally understandable. If that is the case, then I would say your options really are limited if you don't have a forced air dryer, because without really seeing that ink through the full evaporation process and curing, there's really not that much way to know other than doing the wash test. Water-based ink is not like plastisol where you can pull it and crack it to see if it's cured and stretch it. So it's a little different in that way. I would say if you can afford to get the forced air flash at a minimum, that would help. Otherwise, you're just going to have to cure under a flash for a long time, or take it over and cure it under a heat press. And during last week's episode, Jason pointed out that if you're curing with a heat press, you cure for 10 or 15 seconds or however long till you see the steam coming, and then you need to open the heat press up, let the steam get out of the way, and then go back down. And so you might have to do that a couple of times to really evaporate all of the water out of the ink, and then cure that ink to the desired temperature for the desired time. So, plastisol, you need to get to a certain temperature throughout the ink. So basically, ink just needs to get to that temperature to cure and hold for a few seconds. Water-based needs to get to like 320 and hold for 30 seconds or something. So, you really got to give that evaporation time to happen. So it's just going to be trial and error testing for you to, try. If you're just curing with a flash like me, set a fan on the other side of the room, blowing air so that there's some air movement over the top of the shirt. And that's going to help you heat that shirt to a temperature for a longer amount of time without scorching it, because it gives some movement in the air so that it's not just direct forced heat. And so that movement's going to help you really regulate temperature a little more, so you can have some test shirts that you're putting under there, and you can turn the fan up or down to determine, how fast you can run the fan to keep it from getting above a certain temperature. So I've, done it on fleece before, where I've put a fan, I've bumped it up to medium, because as long as I did that, it kept the sweatshirts from getting beyond a certain temperature. So, You just have to play with that. You mentioned here that you do have a forced air flash, which is great. And it does take some mastering. So, you'll want to just test how long you need to leave it under that, and what temperature or what settings your flash may have to get the ideal state. But I think what you're looking for is for the steam to stop, which identifies that you have evaporated all of the water. And then I would give it a little bit after that, so maybe 5 or 10 seconds after that, just to be sure. So as you're testing to see how long you need to leave something under there and how high the temperature can be and what setting your forced air flash could be on, then just look for that. You're looking for the evaporation to stop, and then plus 5 or 10 seconds after that, whatever you feel comfortable with based on how hot the garment's getting. If by the time the evaporation's over, then it starts to really shoot up in temperature, then you might only want to go 5 seconds, or however long you determine. But that would be the way I would go about testing and determining how long I do that. Aside from that, I would do that to figure that out, and then I would maybe do some test shirts that way. Just one night I would go and just have, all right, I'm gonna print some shirts just for the heck of printing. Maybe print some shop shirts with your own logo. Once you find that setting, do like 10 of them, and in the same way. So you've got these 10, you're like, all right, I know I did all 10 of these exactly the same under this new setting, new time span that I've determined, and then go wash them and see how the result is. If that were me and I washed them and all turned out fine, I would be pretty confident that I'm curing the ink, and that would be my process moving forward. I would periodically retest just in case my flash is struggling to get different temperatures or something, or the time of year maybe changes the temperature in my shop. So I would test, and then as new types of garments come in, you might want to test that with a hoodie versus testing it with a t-shirt versus, a cotton shirt versus the tri-blend or versus a polyester. So I would just take notes and determine what settings and time and what you're looking for with each of those types of garments, and let that be kind of the standard moving forward. Because even if you have a conveyor dryer, you're doing the same thing. If you're in a shop that has a conveyor dryer and you're running a full-time business, you're going to set all of your polyester jobs at the same day, because you're going to have to change the settings on your dryer in order to run those garments. So, and then once you get cotton ones, again, you're going to go change your settings on your dryer. And then you get hoodies, you're going to go change the settings on your dryer. So it's the same process if you're running a full shop. So that's the process I would take with that forced air flash. And then Jason did point out here that the heat press is water-based cure is like 2.5 minutes per shirt. So yeah, it is time consuming. But I think if you're in that situation, you're probably kind of the early stages of your business, and time is a little less of a concern than quality for you. You're really focused on learning, getting it right, finishing with a great product, knowing that while your time is valuable, it's also not costing you anything. So you're okay spending a little extra time on every shirt to make sure that it gets done properly. Heather said, when I wasn't using warp drive, I would do 45 seconds or so for every shirt, then start again at the bottom of the pile so they could cool again, and then 45 seconds again with no steam at the end. That's great, Heather. That's a great process. Yeah, I think that's a great idea, giving them time to dry. But that's with her flash dryer. She's not talking about a heat press. She's talking about a flash dryer. So yeah, that's a great process. Great idea. I've done that sometimes when I have a large design that's larger than my flash. And so I'll go through and make sure that one side of it gets cured or to the temperature, because I'm using the warp drive. So it gets to that 260, 270. And then I will, by that time, the rest of it is dry to touch. So I'm not really worried about it. So then I'll hang them all up and then go back through and lay them on the platens once I'm done printing, and spin them all around again to do one more flash to cure the other side of the print or the rest of the print. I have also found that if you do have a print that's larger than your flash, what I will normally do is, as I'm putting that shirt, when I pull it loose after I'm done printing, I will kind of pop up the edges of the shirt and almost fold it under itself so that it creates what essentially becomes a crater inside of the shirt. So on the sides of the platen, it's kind of raised up like a ridge on all sides. And what that does is it kind of creates a heat bowl so that the flash doesn't just come down on the platen and disperse. It comes down and hits those ridges and kind of stays. And I found that heats more of the shirt faster. And so I can get the outside edges of the print, even if it's bigger than my flash, to the temperature that I need to without getting the inside too hot. And you'll want to play with the height of the flash when you're doing that as well, because I have also found that you can have the flash too close to the shirt. Not for danger's sake, but you can have it so close that it's not really getting the heat that it needs to because it's not getting the air to breathe. And so I've found that there's a spot that's not too close, but a little higher will actually get the shirts hotter faster than it will if you're super close. So you could even use that to in your favor. And if you need it to slow down, you could go a little closer, or you could go the opposite way. Obviously, closer is a little more dangerous, so you do have that factor of worrying about it touching the flash or getting too hot or scorching. But just know that closer to the shirt doesn't always mean hotter faster. Sometimes giving that flash a little bit of room to breathe will actually allow your shirts to get hotter, and that can be a good or bad thing. And then, of course, if you need it even higher, or you have this in between that's like, man, I don't want to go too high because then it's not getting hot fast enough, and I don't want to go too close because it's too fast, or it's getting too hot in the dead center, then that's when you'll want to set a fan across the room and have some air blowing, and that'll help you regulate that temperature. Because, if your flash is like mine, it doesn't have a gauge on it. It's either on or off, and on is full blast. So having that fan to get some air moving will give you the effect of like Emus has with his or her forced air flash. So it's the same kind of result if you just have a standard flash with just a fan blowing across to get some air movement. All right. What other questions? Let's hear it. Anything about curing or back on the discharge or water base with the catalyst or anything? Let's hear what questions you have. While I wait for those questions to come in, I'll go ahead and tackle some of the other things that I kind of had in mind, just due to the questions that I've been getting or that I have had come in as a result of me asking this week. Again, look out if you want your questions to be answered early on in this, and you want to come, even if you don't plan on attending live, you can come back and watch it later. I try to answer the questions that get submitted previously first. So I usually put out a question on Instagram where you can fill out the form and send me a question. I try to answer those first, and then everything else that comes in during the show, answer after that. So the other things I was going to talk about until we see other questions come in would be DTF, just because I've been doing a lot of it here recently. I think we all have. And I've seen some talk about how it's changing the industry, and the industry as a whole is changing anyways and all this stuff. But thought I would just touch on my experience with DTF and where I use it when I steer customers towards it or away from it, and then some promo ideas. So before I do that, this is a good question, and it's related to the warp drive stuff. So if it's flash while it's still in the platen, is that enough to get to the 250-ish degrees? Or should you take it off the platen and flash it so that it has air underneath the print? You can leave it on the platen, physically around the platen, but make sure it's not stuck to the platen. So when you put your shirt on and you make sure it sticks to the adhesive because you don't want that shirt moving, be sure you pull it off of that and let it sit loose on the platen. So just pull it loose and then spin it around or pull your flash over and flash it. So go watch some of my my live printing videos on the channel here that are in the archives. Go watch those, and you'll see when I'm done with a shirt, I will pop it loose and spin it around. So pulling that loose allows the air to get down underneath and fully around the print so that you cure all of that ink. So go that route, and then I think you'll be fine. And my mom's calling one more time, so give me a second. Okay. Helping mom find her flight. All right. So so DTF. I've been doing a ton of it lately. Most of it's hats. I love to do the 5-panel hats, the Richardson 5-panel hats. And so I've been doing a ton of that. I also steer customers towards it if they want just a few items. So that's allowed me to take on more orders that I would normally turn away because I don't do, anything under 12. And so it's allowed me to do that. It's also allowed me to offer it if they want, like, they're just dead set on the full color or like 6-color design, and it's just going to be way more expensive with screen printing, and they only want like 50 shirts, then if I can't talk them down to something a little more reasonable price-wise, because I don't discount my price. I just say, well, if you want it cheaper, you have to minimize the ink colors. But I've also done, like I did 75 dry fit polo shirts. They wanted their full color logo, but they liked the DTF price more than the screen print price. And I was fine with that because honestly, they were dry fit. It's easier to do DTF on it than it is screen printing. So as far as when to use it, I think it just determined by your customer. I've noticed that thinner designs like this is screen printed, but thinner designs, smaller ones, left chest, are fine for t-shirts. They're definitely fine for hoodies and fleece. They're not great if they're like a bigger solid area, then it starts to feel like a sticker. So it's certainly not the quality that screen printing is, but it gets the customers what they want in these certain types of garments and certain unique situations. My favorite place to use it is hats, though. Curious if anybody in the chat has tried other transfer sites like Supercolor, Ninja Transfers. I've only used Stalls, and I've been happy with their Ultracolor Max stuff, and it's worked well. I've even done that on some polyester, like red dry fit shirts, and I just turn the heat down and do it for longer rather than to the temperature that it says. Good thing is the Ultracolor Max is a low cure. I'm not sure if all DTF is, but so I'm just ordering all of my DTF transfers from Stalls. I don't do any printed transfers myself. I've only ever done whatever I can order from Stalls, and I've never even done the Plastisol transfers or anything like that. They're a great option for certain situations. So DTF isn't the only option. So if you can also order Plastisol transfers, and you get the same result as screen printing because it's just Plastisol ink that's been cured to the touch, but not fully cured. It's great for tag prints too, inside label. Which, by the way, I had something come up the other day. Somebody actually was a customer. They wanted to print their own tags, and the neck tag with the label inside. If you're doing that, or you want to do that for your own brand, or you have a customer who wants to do that, be sure you keep in mind that there are legal requirements for what information is supposed to be on those tags. So if you get the shirt and you're tearing away the tag and you're printing your own label in there or the customer's label in there, then if you're not including things like the country of origin, the material makeup, the wash instructions, and the size, I'm not sure what else, I think that's it, then that shirt technically is not meeting the legal requirements. So you need to be sure all of that information is there, and you need to let your customer know that all that information is there. Everybody seems to be super worried that if they don't rip the label out, it's going to look bad. Let me tell you how many people care that the Bella Canvas label is still there, even if you print your own label inside. This many customers will care that that tag is there. So if you just leave the tag in and let the customer rip it out, and your own logo is just your logo, now that shirt is totally fine, because when you delivered the product, when they delivered a product to their customer, it had all of the legally required information on that tag that's sewn in. And so let them rip it off, and then all that's left is your logo printed on the inside neck. So I would recommend going that path, but if you do want to rip it out, be sure you also print that additional information, or you sew in your own tag somewhere else on the shirt. It doesn't have to be in the neck. That information doesn't have to be in the neck, but it does have to be attached to the shirt somewhere, somehow. So be sure that that is included. And then if you're printing garments for youth, anything youth, toddler, infant, any kids size apparel, there is a requirement by law that that apparel, you need to have a record of it. So like in an Excel spreadsheet, you need to have a record of what the apparel was, when you printed it. You need to have the label, the information from the ink. So what lot number and what date the ink was manufactured, and what lot number is on the ink, and when you printed the shirts. And then you need to have all that information written down, and then you need to have an identifier, a number that you give it, whatever number you want to give it for that order, that's something that's unique that would identify that order. And then that number has to be permanently applied to that shirt. So whether you build it into the design, or you print it in the neck label, or you take a Sharpie and you write on the inside, maybe underneath the seam or something on the inside of every shirt, or on the tag, that number needs to be on that garment, because at any point someone could want to verify that, they would want to track back that information is there, and that what the material makeup and what ink was used and the chemicals in the ink. And when you're printing youth, that stuff is super important. So if someone were to check, they would need to be able to see a number, and then they would need to be able to call you, and you would need to be able to reference that number and tell them, oh yeah, that was this order. I printed it on this date. The ink manufacture date was this, and the ink lot number was this, so that they can track everything. Okay. So I have never had that happen at the last shop I worked at. And so over 10 years now in the industry, and I've never had it happen. But it's like having insurance. It is a big deal if it does happen and you get caught without any information. So be sure you do that. All right. So I think I got derailed there. Ninja transfers are good. What are your thoughts on simulated process? We'll get to that in a second. Yeah, Jason, it's for allergy reasons, for chemical makeup with the kids and stuff. So I forget what the actual, legal reasons are, but you can look it up and you can find the information, and it's just really important. Yeah, Vector Lab has a good template pack for the proper information. So there are a bunch of them out there. All right, so let's back up a bit here to Alfonso's thoughts on simulated process. It looks super cool. I have had 2 customers want it in the history of my shop, so it's not something you're going to really run into a lot. I think if you're doing the process and you're creating the artwork, you want to be sure, if you can afford it, it is easier if you have something like Separation Studio to create the different screens. Doing separations in that is a breeze for simulated process. If not, then you need to be comfortable in Photoshop and understand, LPI, angles, dot gain if you're printing plastisol, so that you're creating the right halftones. You need a good exposure unit to really get the good exposure with the halftones. So there's a lot to it. But again, it's not something I've been faced with a lot. So I haven't had to do it back at the shop I used to work at. I worked there for 4 years, and we did like 3 or 4 simulated process jobs and never turned any away. So, it kind of depends on your customer base as to whether, I'm going to have a visitor here, as to whether your customer wants it or, and at that point it's so minimal that you could send out the artwork to be done somewhere else. But, yeah, Mikey Designs has a Photoshop plugin for sim process that, Jason says is good. I've never used it. I've seen that he has it, but I haven't ever tried it. So I think, like I said, simulated process is great. It's even better if you don't have to do an underbase, just because everything's easier without an underbase. So if you're doing, lighter colored shirts, I remember the first one I ever did was on a light blue shirt, so that was nice. But yeah, I'm not sure if that answers what you're looking for, Alfonso. If you had a specific question about simulated process, or if you just needed help doing it, or whether it's worth trying. I mean, I think it's super cool, so it's definitely worth trying if you have that type of graphic. I personally am just not drawn to those types of graphics, and I haven't had a lot of customers bring those to me, so haven't been faced with that a whole lot. Heather almost missed this question. What makes a dry fit more challenging to print? Some of them have a very smooth surface. Yeah, they are very smooth, and that's the good part about printing with them. And that's one thing that makes them a dream to print on one hand. They do seem to have, because of the way it's sewn, it's almost like it has grooves. You'll find the same thing with fleece. And so sometimes those grooves will come across in the print, especially with water-based, and you'll have to do a print flash print if you're doing white. But really the biggest issue with dry fit is going to be the fact that it's 100% polyester, and you're going to always have the risk of dye migration or scorching the shirt. Because those polyester garments the dye in the polyester garments, because the polyester heats up really quickly, and the dye in there doesn't always handle heat very well. It's especially true with red, green, purple, those types of colors, like a royal blue, the bright colors. You're going to have issues where if you get it too hot, you could have, like, I remember back at the first shop I worked at, we got some dry fit shirts too hot in our dryer. Our dryer malfunctioned, actually, and it was getting too hot, and we didn't know it till we had already sent a batch of shirts through, and they were red dry fit shirts and with a white print. And they went into the dryer with a white print on a red shirt. They came out of the dryer with a red shirt and a pink print, because that dye migrated into the ink and changed that ink to a pink. And so you will get that dye migration. Now, there are things you can do, like printing a dye blocker, which is like a black base. It seems to be the opposite of what you would think an underbase should be, but it's basically like a charcoal base that blocks the dye from migrating through into the ink. But really, that's the biggest thing that makes it challenging to print on dry fit, is just that you have to be that much more concerned with the temperature, that you don't get it too hot and you don't run the risk of migrating the dye color of the shirt into the ink and skewing your finished product. And you don't always see it at the time. Sometimes it happens, after you've already cured and it looks fine, but then it's still hot and it continues to do that. It's almost like how, you go to cook a steak and you want it to be, 150, and you're going to pull it off the grill at 140 because you're going to have some carryover. Same kind of effect. You're going to have some carryover in the heat, but also that chemical reaction that's happening where that dye is transitioning into the ink can continue to happen even after you're done and you look at them, you think you're good. So you really got to be careful with the dye migration there. I don't, thankfully, have to be as concerned with it, because that dye migration doesn't happen until that 300 plus degrees, 320, that curing temperature. But I'm using that warp drive, and so I've got, I don't ever have to get above that 270. And even if I get up to like 300 or something, it's not really that much of an issue. So I'm with you. Printing on dry fit's been a breeze, but it's only because I don't have to get things that hot. Yeah. So she printed some shirts here recently and posted on her Instagram, and did an event, and there were some Perkins coaching shirts. She said they were printed on some Brooks shirts. Brooks is a running company. And yeah, so you didn't have to worry about that because it didn't have a lot of white. Yeah, that's great. So, and that's, these are the types of things that you take into, and you did use warp drive, so that's good. Those are the types of things that you take into account when you're selling an order to a customer, and they're asking, hey, can we have these red dry fit shirts and do a white print? If you're not set up to confidently accomplish that without dye migration and being sure that the ink is cured, then maybe suggest something different to them. You might say, hey, have you considered, like I charge a little more for white ink. So I always let my customer know, hey, this is a little more if you were to go black ink, or a blue ink, or a lighter shirt with a red ink. So maybe like a light gray with red instead of a red shirt with white ink. Then you could kind of help steer them in the right direction that they may not have thought about, and that can help you sell an order that becomes much more that you can print more confidently and not run into these issues and struggles. CEMIS, thanks for joining, and thanks for your question and for your encouragement there. Always happy to help. And I'll just piggyback there. Everybody should be sure you like the video, share it, tell everybody about it. Doing this every week. And then you'll notice down in the bottom right or bottom left of my screen here, bottom right, to my left, I guess. Little call out there, save 20% on my business course. So I do have my business course out. It's on demand. And during this show each week, you can save 20% on that course. If you haven't bought the course and you're at a point in your screen print journey where you're ready to really make some business decisions and grow a business, then that course is for you. It's 7 on-demand sessions. And during this show only, can you save 20% if you use the code lunch break. That code ends in 10 minutes, 12 minutes. It will no longer work. And then next week, it'll work for just the hour that the show is active. So during the show, everybody say hi to my little friend here. He's home from preschool today, sick. And he's playing with my tripod. Loves to play with my equipment. All right, so we got about 10 minutes left, so let me know what other questions you have, if any. And then in the meantime, the last topic I think I had talked about discussing was really just promotional strategies. So I bring this up just because whether you may or may not have heard me say something along the lines of add value, not discounts. I'm a big proponent of not using discounts to sell an order, because what discounts do is they eat into your profit, right? So they eat into your profit, and they tell your customer that, hey, they could afford this to be less. So then the next time they order, they have a little harder time, not always, but sometimes they might have a little harder time paying for the full price for an order that they had gotten a discount on last time. Strangely enough, the way the human brain works is if you were to add more value at the same price, you're still technically eating into a potential profit there, but it doesn't register the same way. It still registers in the mind that they're getting a discount. So you still get that same rush, that same feeling of accomplishment, that they've gotten more than they've paid for. But they still understand in their minds that they paid full price for the order itself, and they don't expect the bonus or the add-on the next time. They just expect the full price. So play to that, So what are some things you can do to add value, not a discount? Well, you might say, hey, for a limited time, for every 100 shirts you order, I'm going to throw in 5 hats. Now, does that cost you money? Yeah, it does. I mean, it might cost you, depending on the size of the order, or the quality of the hat, how much the hat is. That might be, $20 or $30 in hats, and then another $10 in DTF transfers. And so that's cutting into your profit a little bit. But let's say, you sold the order for, $300 or $400, and you're making $150, $200 out of that. You're still walking with $100, but you still end with having convinced them you gave more value than the other shop. So you won the business, and you won the business at what the customer thinks is full price for the order. So when they come back next time, they understand that you're not doing a add-on promotion, and so they expect to pay full price, but they appreciate the value that they got, so they come back. So, look for ways to do things like that so that you don't have to always convince somebody by giving a discount, because when we give discounts, we're perceived as discounted, and we don't want to be the Walmart screen print shop. We want to be the high-end, factory outlet screen print shop, not factory outlet. What would be the Nike store versus Walmart, So that look for ways to do things like that, extra, maybe you tag the shirts or you fold them up individually, say I'll do that for free, or, maybe they want to provide the poly bags and you'll bag them for free, or you'll deliver, hand delivered for free, or free shipping. That's something that free shipping is something, while it may seem like a discount, that shipping cost is something you get to write off at the end of the year. So you're still getting kind of a double savings there. You're getting the savings from writing off the shipping. You're telling the customer it was free. So you're getting that benefit of their, coming back to you because you gave them extra value that the other shop didn't. So it's really kind of a win for everybody. So that's another area that you could look to, adding some value rather than discounts. All right. What other questions do we have? Got a few of you left here. Still got 6 or 7 minutes. So let me know what your questions are. I don't know if you all saw my post on Instagram today. Came across an old video of myself printing actually here in this shop. It looks totally different because I didn't have all the lights down here. I didn't have the cabinets or the tables or even this press. It's kind of dark looking. It was when I first moved into this shop, and my business was still less than a year old. And I was printing some shirts, actually printing me and my family some Denver Broncos shirts. And it's just funny to look back and see how long it was taking me to load the shirt, and I honestly felt like I was moving pretty quickly at the time. And now I'm looking back now and I'm like, man, get it on there. What are you doing? And, printing and multiple times, and just, the confidence that I didn't have at that point. It's just cool to look back and see man, I used to really struggle with this. Now I'm a lot more confident. I still make mistakes and I'm still not the best printer in the world, but I've gained confidence and I've gotten better. And so take wherever you're at. And, if you're just starting, you've never printed before, that's okay. And you go to print a shirt and it takes you 10 minutes to print one shirt. That is okay. It's perfect. That is exactly where you should be because you're just starting. And so take that, and next time try to get a shirt in 9 minutes and try to make that print even more smooth, and try to make adjustments that make things turn out better, and try to do one part of the process differently. And then the next time, you might print it in 8 minutes, and you just continually get better, but don't let it stop you from starting. And don't ever compare where you're at now with where I'm at now, unless you're in year 10 plus like I am. But just want to get that out there because I'm a firm believer that where you're at is okay, and it's great for you, and you shouldn't be ashamed of it. You should just keep going and keep trying and keep getting better. All right, Heather has a question here. Do you ever create ink colors without using the Pantone system to have a more opaque color so you don't need to use an underbase? Good question. I have actually added, I did this not long ago. I needed a light blue. Yep, a light blue. It was going on a royal blue shirt, and I didn't want to do an underbase. It was actually going on a dry fit shirt. So I didn't want to do an underbase because I didn't want it to get too hot, and I just didn't want to do an underbase. I was already doing white as one of the colors. It was a royal blue shirt. It was getting a navy blue, a light, like a Columbia blue, and a white. And so I chose to take some Green Galaxy Comet White, and I added some blue and black pigment to it, and I created my own light blue color because the customer didn't have a PMS color they wanted to get to. So I really just had the creative freedom there to get to the color shade that I wanted. And so I used that so that I could have that white built into it to get a little bit more of that opacity like you're talking about, to try to thicken and enhance the opacity so that it's not as transparent. And really, it turned out great. I didn't have to do multiple prints. I printed it on a 156 screen, and I was able to do that without an underbase. It might have been fine either way, but I feel like that extra white pigment and that extra thickness of the Comet White really worked out well. I'm not sure how that would work out. I know you've commented here that it is you're about to print light blue on a black. Not sure how that would turn out, but it's certainly worth a try, because especially if you're printing water-based, anytime you can avoid doing an underbase, you're going to end with a thinner, more comfortable, softer, more breathable print. So I try to avoid the underbases if I can. And then Danny, looks like I answered your question, but I'm going to read it just in case. Do you personally underbase your water-based prints when printing colors on dark shirts? Red ink on navy. What's your brand of choice for water-based ink? Yep. So Green Galaxy. I've only ever used Green Galaxy. They've always worked great for me. If you're using the PMS mixing system with Green Galaxy, be warned that not all of the formulas are correct. They will get you close, but I always start off every formula with half of the amount of black pigment that it calls for, and sometimes half of the amount of white pigment that it calls for. And then I add more to get to the desired color that I want. Most of the time what I have found is the formula, the recipe that they give for just about any color, there's too much black. So start with half, go up from there. So I've only ever used Green Galaxy. I've been happy with them. I do print an underbase when I'm going on a darker shirt with a colored ink. I will tend to do that underbase with the Comet White in a 156 screen or a 160 thin thread. I've got the Eco frames. And then I will print a single pass and then print the color over top of that. If I need that color to be more vibrant, I will rather opt to print the color twice, a print flash print, than print the white twice, because the color twice does not thicken the ink layer as much as the white twice will. So sometimes you might have to print the white, flash it, come back, print it again, flash it, and then print the color on top of that. If you need to do that, be sure you don't get the shirt too hot, or you give it time to cool off after that second flash. Otherwise, it will affect how that color really lays down on that white. And if you have other white showing and you've printed that at the same time, often you'll get sticking on your screen. And so that white will stick. It could pull ink away from the shirt. And, if you've got other colors that you're printing, it can pull those away. So my preferred way that I always try first to see if it works. Now, every order is different, so you can't just assume you're going to do a print on the white, flash, and then do colors. That doesn't always work. It's a per design basis that you have to try this. But every time I've printed an underbase with the water-based color on top, my first try, the desired operational production series of steps, is print the white, flash it, print the colors. And then sometimes you can print the colors without flashing, wet on wet. Sometimes you have to flash in between. It just depends on the design. You mentioned the grooves, the fabric and dry fit. That definitely happens for me with the belly canvas sweatshirts. Yep, that's the exact fleece I was thinking of too. The 3719 is especially a culprit. How do you make sure the ink gets into those grooves, especially with Comet White? Lower mesh size. So if you do like a 110, then you're going to get more ink laying down. You could also do a little thicker coat of emulsion on that side. So if you're typically coating two coats on the substrate side and then a single coat on the inkwell, you might up that to 3 on the substrate and 2 on the inkwell, and And yeah, see you, Jason. Thanks for joining. And that will create a thicker layer of emulsion on the bottom side, and it will allow more ink to sit into that layer. And then so you're transferring more ink onto the shirt. So that could be one way. But again, another way is just to drop to a lower mesh size so that you get more ink. Aside from that, it's typically just you'll have to print, flash, and then print again to get that other layer to really cover that up. So that's what I found that works. So, all right, we have reached our hour. So I'm going to check out for the day. Hope you all had a great time. Thank you for your questions. Be sure you send those in. You don't have to wait for me to put out the notice midweek asking for questions. Anytime you have a question, just message me on Instagram or send me an email. There are multiple ways to get a hold of me. So send that to me, whether I respond or not. I will add it to my list and try to tackle it in that current week or an upcoming week's live lunch break Q&A. So really enjoying doing these. I keep doing it every Friday at 1 o'clock Mountain Time. So again, thank you all for your questions and for your support. Look forward to bringing you the next one next week. Until then, have a good one.